I'm with Othman today, who is the founder and CEO at Ear Leads, which is a LinkedIn all-bound agency. So the whole idea is that they help you run like anything you need to do on top of LinkedIn. So that is LinkedIn outreach, LinkedIn ads, and LinkedIn content. So if your number one plan this year is to dominate LinkedIn, then this is the first agency you should call. On that note, Othman, did I forget to mention anything?
No, I think, Michelle, that you introduced me in the best possible way I could hope for. So I really appreciate it. We can get into the topic of our conversation today.
Okay, amazing. So the whole idea is that you are an expert at LinkedIn. And so I want to be talking about Claude Code and the likes of, like this AI coding tool. So it could be Claude Code, it could be Codex, it could be OpenClaw. In this instance, from what I gathered, you are heavily relying on Claude Code. I think one of the very interesting projects you are doing at the moment is that you are recreating some open source version of Clay, and you are using Claude Code for doing so. I should just give the floor to you and then let you explain what you're going to demo.
Yeah, of course. So the whole idea for me was to think about how can we build an entire campaign based on signal monitoring, like something that you saw happen on LinkedIn. For example, someone in particular wrote an interesting post about a pain you're solving with your solution, and you want to qualify people who engage with that post and then save them in a database and try to outreach them. And all of this is going to be orchestrated through Claude Code without having to jump a single time on another platform. Obviously, until I show you on LinkedIn that we did indeed send a message to someone. And for the sake of this experiment, I'm going to scrap, Michelle, one of your recent posts on LinkedIn. And the message that we're going to send is going to be for you. So our people are going to be able to see that you indeed received the message from the Claude Code terminal. And the whole reasoning behind this is, as we saw it with the state of Claude Code, there's a lot of things that we considered being valuable from software providers, from platforms, that needs to be reconsidered for different reasons. If we take the open source project that you mentioned about Clay, we're big power users of Clay. We love the product. Everything they've been doing in the industry is amazing, but we've been having one important pain. Why should we always build tables again and again, engineer them without necessarily having an automated way to loop intelligence from a whole result of the output of a campaign to influence the way the go-to-market was structured, the way that campaign in particular was structured. So that's the logic point that influenced the decision.
Okay. So you said a lot of things, right? Because first, the demo here is gonna be using a LinkedIn post, scraping engagement. I guess should be filtering the people who engage, and then based on that will be automating the writing and the outreach of the messages. So based on the actual relevant leads. So this is the demo that you're going to be seeing within Claude Code. But then in the meantime, you were talking about Clay, and I think you raised an important point, which is that if you have a very good Clay table, say that's bringing you good or decent results, one thing you would want to do would be to say slightly modify the table based on the feedback that you've been getting. But then here with Team Clay, you need to recreate the entire table, and it's actually difficult to sort of gather the feedback and the results and then bring them back inside of Clay and then say have Clay autonomously improve the table, while and that's I guess what you were coming to is something that you can easily do within Claude Code, because Claude Code can pick up the results and sort of adapt the workflow based on that. Is that what you were mentioning here?
Yeah, 100%.
I guess before we jump into the demo, I wonder, how should we think about using tools like Claude Code? Because in this case, I think you raised an important question, which is we have some dedicated software to run our GTM. Clay is a great example because it's probably the best among them all. But it is true that there is some gap in terms of how you can sort of improve your overall GTM. And so this raises the question, when should I think of just leveraging Claude Code for the GTM activities I want to run? And when should I just go and use a dedicated software like Clay that has, say, hundreds of thousands of users, essentially meaning that the way sort of build the tool is equipped in a way that should be able to help your team because they've seen so many of these use cases.
That's a very good point, especially what you're mentioning about Clay having that many users. I think one element that we should try to analyze is people mention a lot that, well, I'm not sure that users are going to replace Clay, or users are going to replace Lemlist, or users are going to replace Hayrich, whatever, all the providers that exist in the market today, because there is a high complexity curve and a complex learning curve to start using Claude Code. But most of these people think with the framing of a GTM engineer or a person who's already familiar with Clay. And we tend to forget about our first days building Clay tables with a very steep learning curve as well. So the question is more about, will they get more value by investing the time into Claude Code? Or Clay is still safe because they won't get more value by switching to another go-to-market operating system per se. So that's a base for the answer. And second thing that I can add is, well, actually, let me share my screen so I can showcase the way I think about Claude Code and the way I'm currently building that Clay alternative, open source, whatever, is to redefine what is an operating system and what does Claude Code actually supports within that. So you need to think about it in 4 different layers. The first one is the input. You as a user, you as a GTM engineer, you have a query. You want to build an outreach campaign. You want to build a content plus outreach campaign. You have an idea of a go-to-market strategy that you want to implement, and you want to easily be able to put it in place. The best way is to do it either with text or with voice, like transmit the information that you have in mind. So Claude Code is a retainer through which you can give that query. But for Claude Code to implement that in the right way, you need to set up your Claude Code to act as an operating system. And for it to act as an operating system, you need to think about 3 different things. The first one is called Claude.md file. So it's a document that Claude is going to use for general rules, for anything related to queries you're going to share with it. So it's you forcing rules through Claude Code, through the actual model behind the intelligence you're conversing with. A second thing that is important to think about is the skill. So we saw a lot of posts on LinkedIn recently about people sharing skills, mentioning that one skill can send messages, one skill can write outreach messages. The way you should think about a skill is a container in which you embed rules and in which you give access to an API, for example. So you let Claude Code call a skill to perform a specific action. For example, if I want to scrap a LinkedIn post, that's an action. And that action needs to be performed with different components. And one of them is the external environment. So if I take the information from LinkedIn, I need Claude Code to be able to access LinkedIn. So I need to give it an access to that external environment. That's how skills work. And it's very important because that's how you can standardize your usage of Claude Code and make sure that it follows the right rules in a safe way. The last component of the Claude Code container is the memory.md file. So it's a document that will be composed of everything related to you in particular. Example here, in Claude.md, a role could be every time the user asks for scrapping a post, it should use this specific skill. On the memory.md file, you would have information about your ICP, for instance. So on this file, you would have information about who you're targeting, why you consider them as being your ICP, what's your value proposition, what are some ways you've outreached your ICP before that worked. So it can always loop within that container. And the 2 last points that are important for you to understand as well is for these 3 components to work, you need to configure them with context. So intelligence, corrections that you have, configurations, client file if you work for not just your company, but for other people. And obviously, you need to connect external environments through 2 different methods that we've seen a lot of LinkedIn today, either through what we call an MCP or through an API. Once you've done this connection, that you've created your context, this is a system that will work based on your user query. So just by chat, without you having to get into heavy construction of tables.
I loved it. Like it was like a super detailed explainer. But I just as a summary, it's like the big Claude MD file are like the sort of general rules. Skills are somehow like half front, half rules for like dedicated actions. So it's like if I'm doing a specific set of actions, it knows to call a specific skill. And then like the whole memory is just this sort of storage element, aka whenever you do things a good amount of time. So like based on the feedback you give or based on the result that you've gotten, it sort of like adapts and autonomously improves. But then like the whole idea is that in order for like those skills to operate or Claude Code to operate in a proper way, you want to feed it as much information as you can. And so like that is like, you know, the information you have on your business. So you mentioned client files, which will include the information you have on your CRM, or it could be like the call transcripts, etc. And then like you have this other layers to context. So like the agent configs, I guess like would be like the sort of way you want your agent to behave. The writing corrections is like you giving feedback, and so like this plugs into the memory. And then intelligence is like, I guess like the intelligence of the model. And so like the whole idea is that this whole all these components just like feeds this GTM operating system, which essentially means that the way you interact with this system becomes extremely simple as the sort of underlying technology behind it gets more complex, right? Because like the technology below it has all the transcripts, all the skills, the MD file has like historical data, has feedback and so on. But then like the way you interact is just by talking to it, which is interesting because like it makes me think about the point you were mentioning about, you know, it's one thing to say, I'm going to be continuing to rely on Clay because I've relied on Clay for so long. And then you mentioned the learning curve of like leveraging a tool like Clay. And here, like, I do understand your point of saying, if you are new to both these tools, aka Claude Code and Clay, it's one thing to understand and to learn about Clay tables and understand where each action is. It's another thing to just like chat with some sort of model and have it improve its results as you keep interacting with it.
You're right. You're 100% right, Michel, here. And especially when you try to do some more creative type of campaigns where you need a system that can interact with different external environments, you need to have an orchestrator that there is a word we call like it needs to be interoperable. It needs to easily have access to any outside environment through an API connection. And the whole idea of tools struggling or trying to build external integrations to make sure that the user experience works as it should is now kind of being bypassed, because as long as your provider has an API, you can interact through that API with it, which opens a complete new realm of possibilities for DTM engineers and any person working on revenue-related activities as well.
Because that means that before, when you would like to do some GTM engineering work, you would be switching between 5-7 different tools. You do some work on one tool, you switch to the other one. But now it's like I can do everything within Claude Code. As long as the other tools I need have some sort of APIs, I can just like call them from the terminal. So now my entire work process entails writing some stuff or dictating some stuff, and then I'm able to leverage the intelligence of this tool without ever exiting my Claude Code instance.
Yeah, we can take an example here about list building. When you qualify a list of leads and you have different steps in your qualification flow, well, now you can test 3 or 4 different approaches with an outcome as a direction to Claude. For example, hey Claude, one of my current go-to-market hypotheses is to sell Claude Code coaching to senior people in companies. You would give that as an hypothesis, and it can refine your entire qualification flow within a few minutes and test it and give you the leads, and then you can score them to make it refine the qualification criteria as it's used. If we were to do this right now on Clay, you would need to duplicate your table. You would need to modify each column of your qualification flow, especially if you have dependencies. For example, first verify the job title, then verify the company size, then use this API to provide this additional information. Well, now just from one prompt, if you've built and designed your skill right, it's very easy for your operating system to know which API to call, which skill to call, to execute on the simple user query that you have shared. This decreases by 10x the time to value and the time to testing any GTM hypothesis that you might have.
And then on top of that, what's interesting is you mentioned that you had this hypothesis. Claude can actually challenge a hypothesis based on all of the context it accumulated, aka saying, oh, actually, since I have access to your 15 latest calls, I can tell you that, say, 10 out of 15 mention wanting to learn more about Claude Code. And it so happens that the job title was, say, like this specific job title, and they were at this level of seniority, which makes me think that your hypothesis is very good, but that we can perhaps go and get like this other persona as well on the list, for example, which is once again something that Clay wouldn't be able to do.
As it provided the hypothesis, the new hypothesis, it can also support you in building all the assets you need to execute on that hypothesis, which messaging to use, which content maybe to produce to support your outreach motion, which call to values you can have in your as CTAs in your messaging, which may be additional decision makers you could test with that angle. So the possibilities are endless because it has all the context it needs to refine them. And I really invite people listening to us today who will try to build things on Claude Code to not think of this is not possible, or I don't think that it will be able to do this. Just try, ask questions, put Claude Code on plan mode so it doesn't execute anything, and just share with you a direction. And you're all going to be amazed by everything it can achieve.
I love it. Okay. Well, Osman, should we jump into the demo?
Let's put some context here about what we're going to try to do. You recently shared an interview you had with Kenny, who is the head of GTM at Call IQ. Okay. What we're going to try to do here is to scrap people who engage with your post and try to find senior level ICP who respects what we consider internally at Earleads as people we could work with. And we're going to try to test one hypothesis in particular in the outreach copy. We've been building a lot of agents and skills related to GTM, and we want to showcase to these people what we've been building. So our call to value here is going to be, hey, if you have 15 minutes anytime, I will be super happy to show you how we're rebuilding Clay from the scratch. Free value, there's no strings attached to that. It's a foot in the door to start a conversation with those people. So let's take your posts.
Yeah, and the reason why you are picking these posts, the topic is related, right? We are mentioning Claude Code. You would assume that the people who engage with the post are interested in learning more about how to use Claude Code for GTM. And then it's like what you'll be sharing, as in the free resource you'll be sharing, will be how you actually are building an entire lead generation tool within Claude Code. So there is some odds that if they're interested in one, they will be interested in the other.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get straight to Claude Code. Let's build a go-to-market outreach campaign. First, scrap the leads from this LinkedIn post. Second, qualify them based on Earleads ICP. Third, I want to test in the outreach this angle, 15-minute chat about how we're rebuilding Clay in an open source way. Goal might be to, at some point, support them. If you give everything you have in your mind, like all your context is going to perform way better every time. So the goal might be at some point to support them with building their own GTM OS through Claude Code. Okay. Here we have the idea of a campaign. We want to scrap leads. We want to qualify them based on Earleads ICP, and we want to test in the outreach a different angle. We're going to add maybe some additional direction and rules. Don't send the messages before showing me the leads. Let's only qualify 10 people for the sake of the experiment. 6, I will give you one profile to send a message to as a test. Now I'm in plan mode here. That's very important. You don't have to directly jump into bypass permissions. Go into plan mode first. So Claude reads all your context, all your files, all the skills, and then gets back to you with all the direction it's gonna use. So whilst it's thinking here, I do want to show you one thing that might also be valuable. Yeah, so the logic it's going to follow here for everyone to understand in an easy way is it's going to take the LinkedIn post that I shared. It's going to find on the skills we have on Claude Code, which skill can let it scrap people on LinkedIn. So we're using an API provider that can execute this kind of actions. Then it's going to qualify them based on, remember what we said before, a file, a MD memory file that gives rules about who's early ICP, which API we use to do that, which type of information we're looking to get. Then it's going to score and tag them from 0 to 100. Based on the priority, we're going to get different actions that can be performed. So the top leads needs a manual review to decide whether we should send them an automated message. That is, of course, contextual and meaningful, or manual outreach. And for the 2 other tiers, it's going to depend on the tier. So the message they will receive is going to be adapted. Then it's going to define if it's 1 campaign, 2 campaigns, 3 campaigns, whatever variations we want to have, whatever A/B testing we want to have. And then based on the volume, it's going to respect some rules to not make the LinkedIn account get flagged as having like too high automated activities. You can go with like 20 to 25 or 30 connections per day, and this should be safe. And the final step, which is very important here, is based on those results. I can ask Claude every day, hey, we've sent 60 messages in the past 2 days. Something doesn't work out. What are some options we can test and refine for the next of the campaign? And it's going to use this information based on the qualification to refine new directions for the tag and new directions for the copy. So that's how this use case is going to work. And Claude Code is still working through the plan. So in the meantime, Michel, do you have maybe any question or something you want me to clarify?
Yeah, I think for me, the most interesting part is the step 7, as in like the intelligence bit, because I think that saying, let's say I'm like, if I want to criticize a workflow, so something I could say would be to say, hey, at the end of the day, this whole scraping and LinkedIn post, qualifying, scoring and tagging, and then like running a campaign, I could do this before Claude Code, because like I could do this with a good amount of, I could do this with N8N, with Clay and so on. But then, so what you could say is that Claude Code makes it easier, one, but what's most interesting to me is the 7th step, where essentially like this whole intelligence is something that has been unlocked thanks to tools like Claude Code, because of the fact that it has this constant pulse on so like all of your client files, like all of your campaign results and so on. And so, yeah, I would like to expand a bit more on this, like what the logic for refining your scoring criteria and for refining your copywriting frameworks whenever you get more or less, say, good or bad results from your campaigns, and what happens then?
Yeah. So the whole logic here is to first define what's the main reason why we launched that campaign. What's the KPI on which you're going to judge that it's working or not? Giving you a practical example, for one of our ICPs, we take as success KPI the fact that they accepted the connection rate with the note. So we send them a connection and we have a note that's very direct, very punchy, and we're very open and honest about the reason why we're outreaching them. It's because we want to try to sell them something. We have some campaigns that go in that direction. And when we do have them, the fact that they accept our connection with that salesy note, we consider that as a first successful factor, meaning we've been able to get them to read the message and to accept the connection request, even if they understood that we're trying to directly sell them something. So the first thing we think about is what is the success factor KPI that we're following. Second is, okay, well, now that we have either the connection accepted or people openly answering our questions or wanting to receive a booking link to have a conversation with us, do we really consider that that number that we got is sufficient? And the honest answer is always no. You can always have a higher acceptance rate. You can always have a higher open rate. You can always have a higher positive reply rate. So we then start to get deeper into what pains the people who positively answer are experiencing. So we try to derive from, let's say you sent 100 messages on LinkedIn and you have 15 who answered positively. Well, is there an additional qualification factor that these 15 are sharing that we might have missed in the first qualification flow? So here, what we do is we give another prompt to our agent to go look into news related to their company, news related maybe to the industry in which they operate, news related maybe to competitors. So is there a fundraising from one of their biggest competitor and now they want to accelerate on their go-to-market, even if it was maybe a goal for Q2 and we're only Q1. Firmographic level on the ICP, did this person that we reach out just started working in this company? If yes, then, well, can we find similar decision makers from the other companies that we try to outreach and get them with that same end goal? So it's really a sparring session that you're having with your Claude Code intelligent operating system to find those data points that are very, very hard manually to identify, but that can easily be identified by Claude Code.
Yeah. So the whole idea is to look at, like, let's say you targeted an audience and then this audience has a 40% connection acceptance rate. It's like, is there an audience segment that could be more precise or accurate that has, say, 75% acceptance rate? Or like, what's the common point? What's the common denominator between the people who all accepted the connections? Because again, this is something that we've seen as well. And obviously, like back in the days with the likes of Claude Code, you had to do this analysis manually. But it's like, you could say, I want to target like let's say you're doing a campaign targeting HR leaders, so like anyone targeting working in human resource, and so like you would be targeting head of human resources, you'd be targeting director of human resources, you'd be targeting head of people, you'd be targeting head of employee well-being, whatever. So you have like all of those different titles, and then you see that you have, say, like a 30% reply rate. But as you go more granular, perhaps something you can say is that when there is people in the job title, you know, all of a sudden the reply rate jumps to, say, 67%. And so in this instance, I guess, and that's also what I'm curious to know, is, okay, now Claude picked up information that this audience segment has a higher reply rate. Now, how does it go and improve the scoring criteria? When does it conclude that the test is, say, telling enough in order to say, okay, now we can go and sort of modify how we score our ICP?
Yeah, so this is when human intervention is still needed.
This is
because
when
it needs a lot of taste and additional elements that it might still omit and miss today. Giving you a practical example here, you might want to go in another direction. Like you outreach people, you have a high acceptance rate, you have a high positive answer rate, but they don't buy from you. So either something else is missing in your funnel, maybe it's your offer that's wrong, but if it's not your offer that's wrong, then it might mean that you want to try something fundamentally different, another offering, going after an additional person in that campaign with an angle that is fundamentally different as well. So in that case, you can also use, this is what really amazed me with Claude Code is I gave it all the context for earlies. Like it knows everything. When I have random ideas at midnight, I send them to Claude Code and it saves them as memory. So if I had an idea of a way to monetize our services or a way to close people, it has access to that information. So I can have sparring sessions. We analyze everything that happened together. Okay, well, we have 25% acceptance rate and we have 40% reply rate. But in this 40% reply rate, most of them are just like saying, hey, this is not the right time, or I'm not sure I'm the right fit for this. So we can now refine all this information, both based on quantitative and qualitative information Claude Code already has access to. So context about your campaign and data about the actual campaign. And then you can provide additional information that is not yet included into the context file that you gave to Claude.
Cool. So what do we have at the moment? What did our agent do already?
So we have the plan that's ready. So it's going to first scrap the LinkedIn post engager using a specific skill. Then it's going to qualify them using another skill. And then it's going to present leads as a stop point for me. Then it's going to draft a campaign messaging with one variant. And then we're going to give it a profile. It's going to be yours, Michel, for the sake of the experiment, to send a message using the final skill. So here, I can auto accept. I trust the plan. I give the bypass permission direction, and it's going to take maybe between 5 and 10 minutes to run. So one other element that we can talk about is that when you use Claude Code, you can use multiple instances in the same time. So you can be working on different projects simultaneously. Here we're working on this campaign that we're currently doing, but I could be working on a LinkedIn post that I want to prepare for me or for one of my clients, or I could work on a new agent that I want to create for any reason, like anything you want to do. So multitasking now became something possible because we're giving to Claude Code direction and context, and it needs some time to do the work before you come back to review. So a tangent topic that we could chat about, Michel, here, and I think that you should maybe do a post or a series about it, is how Claude Code is going to fundamentally change how people work. How do we operate? Like, what does work even mean right now? It's a very exciting topic. I don't know if you have a particular question regarding that.
Yeah, I think we can discuss it because I have a lot of thoughts around that. I feel like Claude Code actually rewards the thinker more than the operator. You know how you have people who have a very good vision, they know what needs to be done, but then don't have the courage to make it happen. While on the opposite side of things, you have the people who know how to get shit done, but they don't always know what's the best thing to do. In these instances, typically you tell the agent what it has to do, while you wait for it to do the work, and then you can sort of review it. So I feel like it's gonna change a lot. But before I hear your opinion on that, I have a question that's related to the plan. Because one thing you showcased was that your plan, like the first 2 steps of the plan, were calling a skill. And so I would like to understand how you built each of these 2 skills, and then I would be very interested in hearing your opinion about, say, how work will change because of these agents.
Okay, cool. So regarding the skill, there are some open source information available provided by Anthropic directly on how you can leverage at maximum capacity Claude Code, and one of them is about skills. The reason why a skill is important is Claude Code doesn't work the same way as ChatGPT or just Claude with the memory part. It needs to verify all the files it has access to define what is the best way to do something. And when you build a specific task, giving you an example with the scrapping, it's very relevant. The first time I tried to scrap comments, or the first time I tried to answer comments directly from Claude Code, it failed to push the comment as an answer to people, and it was just adding random comments on my post. The reason why it failed to do that is because it didn't access the most recent comments on my post. So I gave it a feedback, but that feedback wouldn't have worked if it wasn't included in the skill. So the skill, it's everything that needs to be verified, everything that needs to be done, the access to an external environment to perform a specific task. So if I want to interact with LinkedIn posts directly from Claude Code, what do I want to do? Is it scrapping people who commented, people who liked? If yes, then this should be an independent skill. Do I want to answer to people who commented on my lead magnet post? Well, that should be also an independent skill. You can create as many skills as you want because you want to make sure that one skill equals one action. You have an output and you have an input, and there is a way to build them. You need to give rules, you need to test them, You need to give them access to external environment, and you need to do all of this in a safe way. But the whole safety thing needs an actual conversation. Guys, be careful. I've seen a lot of people get their API keys stolen because they don't run cybersecurity checks a bit on their code, on the code they open source, or on the apps they deploy.
But then, like, as a follow-up to the skill question, could we have a look at, say, one of the two skills you called?
You want to see the details of the skill, am I right?
Let's say I'm listening to this. I want to recreate this workflow. Then I would be interested in understanding how did you specifically build this skill, not just like building skills in a broad sort of way, but more so how did you think about building this specific skill for this specific action?
The way you should think about, if we take the LinkedIn case, we're going to do some good free promotion here to an amazing provider. We use Unipile, who provides APIs to interact either with LinkedIn, WhatsApp, or email inboxes in general. And they approach this in a very smart way, meaning that they create an SDK. So an SDK is a software kit development. It's everything you need to know on how to perform an action within their API. So they provide an API to interact with an external environment. And then in their SDK, they will tell you, here's what our API can do. So one thing that you should do when you build a skill to interact with an external environment is to find the SDK page. So it's always public on Google for each of these companies. And you can even ask Claude Code to go look for the SDK page for Claude to understand the logic behind the interaction it needs to have with the API provider. This is very important because without it, it's going to create some errors and your skill is not going to work. So it needs to know, it's like a way for it to understand the language. How should I interact? How should I communicate with that external API every time I want to run a specific action? So it needs the access to this. That's the first important point. The second is for you to be very clear and precise about the output you want to get. You want to give the direction and the context of what is a positive outcome. If a positive outcome in this case is scrapping all the people who commented on the post, well, I want all the people who commented on the post. Not 50, not 60, not 70. I want all of them to be scrapped. So Claude needs to get this information to really understand what success means, because the script, the code it's going to write is dependent on your query and your direction. Sometimes if you don't give a very clear outcome and positive outcome, it's just going to go on a rampage freestyle and consider that, well, if I get 100, it's enough. So you need to be very contextual. Then you need to think about the input. What is the input that you're going to give it? Is it the link to get access to that? Or you're going to ask it to fetch itself, to go itself find that LinkedIn post?
So, Atman, I'm wondering, where's our AI agent at the moment? Like, what did it manage to do?
So it did scrap the LinkedIn post engager, commenters and likers. And right now it's qualifying 10 leads through our flow of qualification. And then it's going to present in a table the leads for me. That's an additional thing that needs to be considered when you build your skills and your flows. Depending on the direction you give, sometimes it takes a bit of time. But it's going to get the work done in the best possible way. This circles back to the multitasking part.
Because then we were talking about what does it change in terms of how people should work. So I wonder, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so regarding the change of how people are going to work, I think that we've seen an era where nerdy people who could focus for extended period of time were able to accomplish amazing things. The developer era. I think that now we're entering into the ADHD era, where people who troubles to stay focused on only one thing, but thrive when they jump from one action to the other, would thrive because now they can get that dopamine hit after every conversation. I fall into this category and I've experienced it since I started using Claude Code. My focus drastically increased because now I can work on 5 or 6, 7 things simultaneously. And every time one thing needs some additional input and context and attention from me, I can just jump back in, give that context. And I know that there is another task that is waiting for me where I can just give the direction, give the feedback, analyze what it did. And this is a fundamental change because we're going to be operating our own agents and orchestrating dozens of them.
Okay, I like it. The ADHD era, essentially saying that like your ability to do some very deep, focused work, I mean, it's still a skill in and of itself, but now like if you're the kind of people who has trouble concentrating on one task, you are now like equally around to do some cool things online.
Yes, exactly.
Perhaps we could like see your screen and then like sort of look at the progress and discuss what it's done already, the agent.
This is a very interesting point that we can look at. It's the disqualification layer. I think that a lot of people, when they build their campaigns on Clay, they need to have an exclude list. So either people who are already your customers, people who are already present on other campaigns. That's something that you can also embed and include directly on your Claude Code direction for the qualification.
And so here, what it did is that because like it looked at my posts, it scraped people, but then it looked at who liked the publications, and essentially it was saying, okay, because like I liked my own post, so it's like I'm not I mean like you wouldn't want to interact with me. And then it looked at my colleagues, so you were like, okay, like I'm trying to target, I'm not trying to target them. Also at the same time, it's like the Collectio team is a GTM agency, which is something I'm saying because I think on the front line I'm saying it can, we're the GTM agency, and so your agent is saying, okay, this is a GTM agency, essentially meaning it's a competitor of yours, so we should avoid reaching out to them. And then like you have some other rules in place. Okay, if the company is too big, you don't seem to be reaching out to them. So I assume there is like an element of I'm only going to be targeting companies up to a certain size. And then we have like someone who has LinkedIn growth pipeline in marketing in tagline. Yeah. So essentially they should be, most likely rendering the same service you are. And then when it's SDRs, BDRs, and freelancers, it's like if there are freelancers, I would assume that your disqualification criteria says they perhaps don't have the budget. And if there are SDRs or BDRs, they essentially do the same thing. I mean, like you do in a different sort of way, right?
Yeah, actually we can do something. So here I gave to Claude the direction to open for me where we have the mention of the 7-gate pipeline qualification so that you can see maybe the different rules that we are using. So on the lead qualification agent MG, it's going to read it and it's going to open it for me, give them in order. Maybe you can add some comments to that flow whilst the agent is finalizing. So yeah, first it's checking here dedupe, so people who are already present. Then pre-qualification, it's going to check the headline, the title to remove people that we consider not ICP. Then it's going to match against exclusion list, clients, partners, team members, so we don't end up outreaching people already in our ICP. Then for the remaining leads, it's going to go find and enrich their LinkedIn profile, okay? Qualify with the country and the role, qualify with the company selection. Then it's going to enrich based on that for me. There is an additional step that is not visible here that uses a web fetch part, which is the qualification on their industry.
Okay, and here at Manak, I think on the step 5, on the 5th step, it says B2B SaaS tech fit 5 to 500. So like assume this is your ICP. So B2B SaaS company or B2B tech companies that have between 5 to 500 employees, which is the reason why Google was being excluded. But then it says, pick best company from experience. What does that mean?
Yeah, so pick best company from experience is we give context on our existing clients. So it has information about what is considered as a successful partnership. Claude was able to derive patterns from that. So the patterns could be, for example, the company needs to have not just technical people in their team, but also founders coming from a marketing background, for example. So if we take our value proposition, we work a lot with the founders and the founding team. And sometimes if it's only technical people in the founding team, we struggle a bit to get the communication as it should. Sometimes the project takes a bit longer. Sometimes we're not getting as much input as we want from them. So the best campaign from experience is from a success factor on our side. We consider that we can successfully deliver our value proposition to these guys.
Makes sense.
Let's see what it is. So it did qualify the leads. Now it's going to push them to the Notion and present the table for me. And we're going to directly, for sake of time for you, Michel, just send a message to you to show that the end-to-end flow actually works. What we can try is maybe to do it.
One question I have. So we had like the first step that was made. So it's like it found the post, it created the engagers, and then like it qualified 10 leads. Is that could we see which are the 10 leads that were qualified? I think like it was talking about it a bit above in the conversation.
Let's see. No, it didn't show them yet, but they should be visible on a Notion database right now. Yeah, so the agent was running. We do have now our leads pushed to a unified database that I'm going to show you right now. And then we're going to send the message because everything is ready to be done. So let me just reshare my screen a minute. For the sake of this whole experiment of running the campaigns through Claude Code, we created a unified database where we push unified leads based on the direction we want to take with them. So the recent one that were pushed are this one here. We have the company size. For some, it's unknown. We have the company type here as well. And directly natively now from Claude Code, I can decide whether or not I want to create the campaign and to launch it. If we get back here, it provided me with some information as well here. For example, in the outreach copy, what we could send as a note is like, hey, first name, most DTM teams burn $500 per month on Clay and still can customize their workflow. We're rebuilding the whole stack open source with Claude Code. So founders own their DTM OS entirely. Would love 15 minutes to show you how the lead scoring agent works live. Okay, so it qualified the leads. It provided them to me. I have here some notes about them. And I have now the notes and the messaging. I can refine. I can do some back and forth if I want. For the sake to close the whole demo, I'm just going to send this message directly from the chat to Michel. So I'm going to take your profile, Michel, as the person that needs to be contacted.
And then obviously, if it wasn't for the demo and to sort of prove that it works, what it should have done would have been to send a message to the people that were shortlisted by the agent.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you can actually use what is it? Unipile is the name?
Unipile, yes.
The Unipile API to reach out to people and to automate the outreach of leads, still using Claude Code and without needing to connect to any sequencer. This actually skipped the sequencing bit.
Yeah, exactly. So it does create the sequencing natively through Claude Code so that we don't have to do it ourselves. So here, as you see, the last message was in December 2024. And we should have the message being sent in a minute, directly sent to you. So as you saw, Michel received the message natively from my Claude Code terminal, and I could decide to send the same thing with some variations, A/B testing, to any other person part of that qualification flow.
Amazing. So essentially, here, I'm going as a small summary, your entire tech stack to go from I see a post, I extract the post, I refine, I score the list and qualify the leads, I come up with some frameworks and I automate the outreach of frameworks, is just Claude Code, some skills that you build, and then in this instance, you use the Unipile API. And then I would assume that if you had wanted to do the same thing via email, then you would have just had to plug some email finding APIs. But that means that here, your entire LinkedIn automation tech stack is Claude Code plus one API. Am I wrong in saying that? Or?
Yeah, currently that's, well, we use another API. It's Firecrawls for everything related to web fetching to find very specific information if we want. And we also use some specific actors on Apify, who's an aggregator of different APIs in the market, to run some specific campaigns in particular. There is one business model that is going to be very interesting for people who want to build stuff, is to build a marketplace that contains skills and different APIs. So you connect just that marketplace API to Claude Code, and it can interact with every best provider in the market based on your use case.
Yeah, we're actually doing that, if you don't know. I mean, for the longest time, we've been helping, say, companies find the right GTM software. And I think I'm seeing is the same shift you are, which is that API are becoming increasingly important when it comes to the stack. But the beauty of API is that they don't need interfaces to be used. So like if you were comparing software and you were helping companies find the right software, at some point you need to have them land on the website. But if it's APIs, they can interact with the API still from your website. And I think the reason why you use or you would want to use API marketplace, is because very often there are some sort of scraping actions or just like overall actions that you will just perform one time because it's some sort of niche actions. So it's like, oh, sometimes you need to scrape Google Maps, other time you need to scrape Instagram. You don't want to have a subscription to this Google Maps scraper and or the Instagram scraper. So it's like if you can have one subscription and from this you're able to access this one scraper and this other scraper, then it's really helpful. And I like this angle about like adding the skills on top of this, because so like the skills help companies interact with the APIs, right? I think like they don't even need to understand what's the right API to use, just need to describe the action, and because you've got the skill, it sort of make them land on the right one.
You summarize it perfectly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for validating this business model that we've been thinking of launching. So stay tuned.
I will follow this very closely.
Before we end this conversation, did you have anything you wanted to add or like any advice you wanted to share for people that are thinking of leveraging these tools and who don't know how to get started or who don't know how to make the most of this platform?
Yeah. My only advice would be don't fall into the AI slop trap. It's not because we can automate a lot of things now that everything should be automated. It's not because you're getting that time back that you're good. We're shifting the value, we're shifting the perceived value from the customer standpoint and in the GTM industry in general. Now that those things are becoming commodities, if you want to still provide value to your clients as a go-to-market agency, or if you run go-to-market for your own company, you need to go a bit up in the ladder of value. You need to be more creative. You need to test more things. You need to keep your taste present. You need to have agency to iterate, try very creative campaigns. So that would be my only advice: is use the tool, but do better, not just more.
Okay, I like it. It's like the tools shouldn't replace your work. They should free up your time to actually use extra time to improve everything you know.
Yeah, 100%.
I love it. Well, Othman, thanks a lot. Actually, it was very impressive. I love like the demo. I love how you actually even came up with a schema. So we had a very good overview of like this whole GTM operating system. Plus, like we had this super nice overview of like how the flow was gonna look like in a visual way. So thanks a lot for that. If people want to learn more from you, specifically as it pertains to leveraging Claude Code to run their LinkedIn lead generation motion, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My profile, I share a lot of stuff. I also have a newsletter documenting our roads to 10 million in annual recurring revenue. We've crossed 1 million in November and we're still growing. So if they want to learn more about us and what we do, LinkedIn is the best place.
Congrats. By the way, how old are you, Othman?
I'm 25.
Okay, 25, already at 1 million. You're probably going to be at 3-4 million before 26.
Hopefully, we're going to work on that.
Congratulations on that. And yeah, guys, like I really follow Othman. I really believe he's one of the sharpest minds in this space. Actually, I've met you offline, so I know you're extremely smart. And so yeah, if you want some great Claude Code or like LinkedIn generation insights, follow him. On top of that, I think you're like doing some very interesting projects. I love like this whole play open source version. I really want to see where it lands. So I guess like just for that, people should follow you. But in the meantime, thank you for being so generous with your time and like really showcasing your system from the inside. And I think we're gonna need to do an episode 2, like
Of course.
in the not too long future.
Whenever you want me.
And so on that note, I wish you an amazing day.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye bye.